Mr. Grobman, this is Yehuda. You had me down as John Lowe, which was the name that I had until I moved to Israel in 1948. I'll stick to my present name, although the name John Lowe, of course, was the name that I used during the time that I was the Army of Occupation in Germany. I apologize for the delay in answering your questions, but I'll try and make it up for you now, although I don't think I'm going to be quite as helpful as Yosef Miller thinks. When you go back, incidentally, would you give my best regards to Jeffrey Wigeter? I worked with him for many years on Kol Yisrael, and also to Moshe Davis. Yehuda Bauer I know, but I don't think he remembers me. But Moshe I know well, and of course Jeffrey I know very well. If you see Jeffrey or his wife Devorah, why my best regards to them both, and tell them I hope to see them out here in Los Angeles. In fact, I hope to be back there in Israel, at least for a visit rather shortly, and we'll see if more can come of it than that. Well, you asked me to go through the questions and to read the questions. I have, incidentally, no mementos. I've kept nothing. I spent a year, 48, 49 in Palmach, and then I was a Chaver Kibbutz in Beit Ra'im, and then I lived in Jerusalem, and then I was in Chicago for a few years getting with the Israeli consulate, and then I went back to Jerusalem for many years, and in all this time I really kept nothing. So I have no mementos to draw on. I have, by way of a memory jogger, a copy here of The Liberated, which I think, Yosef got for me somewhere. I don't know where he found it, but he Xeroxed this copy of The Liberated. Perhaps he got it from Dave Marcus in Philadelphia. And so that's jarred a few memories for me. I even see that I was down as the editor, and Dave was the production manager. So, and I can recall, even at this distance of 29 years, a few of the things I write. I must say that my writing style hasn't changed very much in those years. But I have no mementos. I have only one thing that I have kept, and I have it in front of me at this very moment, a small card, almost a visiting card, which I've now had permaplaqued as an ultimate expression of the ego. And it was given to me on the 23rd of May 1947. It's dated, and I got it together with a watch, which of course has long since been lost. It was a party given to me, for me, by, well, a lot of people in the Aliyah Bet in Frankfurt. And the card says, "To the best friend we had after our liberation of the Nazi tyranny, with most sincere friendship, the Frankfurt Jewish youth," which was a kind of, I won't say a code name, but a name which was used by one of the sections of the Bricha with which I had contact. But that's the only memento I have. And so the rest is going to be reconstructed from memory, and I'll see how well I can do. First question, what was your position in the United States Army? I was a corporal with the United States Army Air Force, and I came to Germany in 1945, having trained as a radio operator for B-17s, a profession for which there was very little use at the time I arrived in Germany, the war having ended. We were stationed first in, the name slipped my mind. But anyway, the second place we were stationed, and permanently in the Air Force, with Hanau. I guess it's about 30 miles downriver from Frankfurt, if my memory is correct. And there was a Luftwaffe air base there, and that's where my squadron was stationed. And there was absolutely no use for a radio operator in late 1945. They were sending them home by the hundreds of thousands. So we were pretty much on our own and allowed to do what we want and find what positions we could find. And of course I was 18 years old and out in the big world for the first time. And found a position in Höchst, which was just the other side of Frankfurt, where AFN, the Armed Forces Network, was based, and where Stars and Stripes, the Frankfurt edition of Stars and Stripes, was published. Now, there was also there an I&E section of the headquarters, I&E Information and Education section of SHAEF, or what followed SHAEF. SHAEF was Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Forces. By that time it had changed to something else, and then there were also 5 letters, but I forget them. It was headquarters for the American occupation forces in Germany, and I got myself attached to I&E as a corporal, as a correspondent. And that really begins the saga for me. This was near the end of 1945. Germany, of course, was a desolate ruin. I was not particularly Jewish in the sense that I had any great level of Jewish awareness. I had no knowledge of Jewish history. I was one of these kids who had gotten through his bar mitzvah under great protest. The extent of my Jewishness was very limited. Although my parents had been active in Jewish affairs, my father was president of the Forest Hills Jewish Center, and my mother to this day is still a member, and Rabbi Boxer, who was there then and is there now as a family friend, Ben Sion Boxer. I'm sure you know him through the seminary. While we're at it, where are you? Well, the Institute of Contemporary Jewry. And of course, you know Jeff, so I'm trying to dig up a few names. Oh, Cy Siegel. And other people who are close family friends are connected with the seminary in New York. This is really nothing to do with what you want, so I'll get back to the story. The position of correspondence was absolutely marvelous. You were free to travel almost anywhere. It was a time which travel in Germany was restricted to those who had permits to travel. It was not a time, of course, of tourism. 1945, the country was a desolation. I was not at all sorry to see this as a Jew, but nonetheless, you dealt with a country that was stricken. And people could not live off the local economy. They had to live either off the black market, or if they had connections with the American army or the occupying armies, they could live in army messes and PXs and barracks and so on. And as a correspondent, you had freedom to travel. You could go into the office and get papers. It gave you permission to go anywhere you wanted to, as long as it's some sort of legitimate reason. And I say anywhere means in the western part of Europe, not in the Soviet-occupied countries. And as long as you could work out an assignment for yourself, you were quite free to go ahead, get your papers, and go. Draw some money, and travel. Well, this was not an opportunity open to everybody, but it was to me. And I covered various stories, both for AFN. I had been in radio and broadcasting as a child, as an actor, in New York, and I had other experience in broadcasting. And if I had a profession at the age of 18, I suppose that was it. And I had some experience in writing, and I was, if I say so myself, not a bad correspondent, and I got my share of assigned stories. One of them was, and this I guess was near the end of 1945, I can't give you a date, but it was cold. To do a story on Jewish displaced persons, and I don't remember if I asked for it or if it was simply given to me in the rotation of things, or because as I recall, a great many of the people on the staff were Jewish, so I was certainly not the only one. And I went to what I thought was Munich now, but I am corrected, I think, by Yosef Miller, who reminds me that the person who ran the Joint Distribution Committee office in Frankfurt was a woman, Sadie Sender. And I had always, in my memory, I thought of this as taking place in Munich, but I remember there was a woman who took me, and I went to interview her at the joint office in what I now imagine was Frankfurt. And while we were talking about numbers and statistics and the kind of things that a reporter asks about, and can you give me some human interest and all that kind of business, and I was busily taking my notes, the phone rang, and she answered it, and she spoke in German, which I did not understand, and she said to me, "Would you like to see what happens?" And I said, "Of course." And she said, "Come with me," and we jumped into her Jeep, and she drove down to the Frankfurt Railroad Station, the Bahnhof, which was a destroyed mess. I mean, it had been one of these glass-topped edifices, and of course there was nothing left, but the tracks were functioning, and they cleared off the platforms, and everybody stood around freezing to death waiting for the trains to come in and go out. Well, what happened was that they had called her and told her there were a load of Jewish refugees coming in from someplace, I assume from the east, What did she want to do with them? And of course she had no more idea what to do with them than I did, but at least she had, that's not true. She obviously knew what she wanted to do with them, but the question was, could she do it? In any event, we went down there, and she took with her 2 cartons of cigarettes, and she said, now you're going to watch me buy a train. When we got there, the refugees were already there. They were sitting, shivering on a platform, one of the concrete platforms. Whatever train they had come in was gone, and they were simply sitting there. And after a few minutes, and I'm trying to reconstruct this after a long time, 30 years, my memory is that one of the cartons of cigarettes went to the station master, and the other carton of cigarettes went to the engineer of another train. So the other train was taken off whatever track it was supposed to be on, like the 415 for Stuttgart or what have you, was simply unceremoniously chugged off that track and backed onto the train, to the track next to which our refugees were sitting, some hundreds of them. And they were loaded on this train, which was supposed to take the German commuters wherever they were going. And then they were sent to a camp in the area. I don't know which camp or how far they went. But I know that what she did in effect was for 2 cartons of cigarettes buy a train. She loaded the DPs on this train and off they went. And that solved the problem, I assume. At least I didn't hear any more about it. It was my first contact with Jewish DPs, and it was quite an eye-opener for a young kid who had grown up in an upper-middle-class family on Central Park West, and who had, well, I was in the American Army in 18 in Keesler, Mississippi, before I discovered that there were adults who couldn't read and write. We used to go to our barracks, where all the hotshot college kids were, and get their wives' letters translated, and have us write letters back to their wives for them. A bunch of coal miners from the Pennsylvania coal fields were in a nearby barracks, and we were all hotshot kids from New York. I'd been a whole half semester at Cornell in Ithaca, and the others also, in, that type of situation where we would very easily read and write, and were obviously impressed with our own education. That was my first experience with survivors of the Holocaust, my first experience with Jews, I think, of any kind who were not New York Jews and highly educated, who went to Ivy League schools as a matter of course, who were in rapid advanced classes in New York City as a matter of course, or went to private grade schools and high schools in New York as a matter of course. Quite a shocker. It had nothing to do with the GI Council. It was not until some months later that I came into contact with the GI Council. I simply continued my reporting, not being very strongly affected by this, by this experience. Well, it made a marvelous story. Some of it, of course, I couldn't write about, like bribing the whole business with the 2 cartons of cigarettes stayed out of the paper. From time to time I would get such stories, and I spent a great deal of time traveling around France and Germany, Belgium, Luxembourg. I got several times to England. I was approached one day by a man. I don't remember the circumstances, but he spoke Yiddish and English, and he was a DP. I don't remember his name. I don't remember even what he looked like. I don't think I ever saw him again. He asked me if I would be willing to take messages or packages for Jewish refugees. I think it was the way he phrased it. And I said it depended on what the letters or packages contained and who they were going to, or some such answer. I wasn't going to get myself involved in black market activities and all the rest of it. And he said that there were letters for Jews who were going to Palestine. And somehow, I don't remember how he did it, but he made it clear to me this was for illegal immigrants to Palestine, and there was nothing involved with black market and this and that and the other thing. And besides, they wouldn't ask me to take packages, only letters. And would I please let them know where I was going, and if they had a letter, it would be a big help to them if I would take it for them, and if not, then they wouldn't bother me. It was entirely up to me to initiate the contacts from then on. I don't remember where the building was. In my mind, it's the same building as the JWB building that I was later director of, but that may simply be a convenient lapse of memory, or kind of telescoping of places. I really can't tell you where I met these people or what I know that quite a few times in the next few months I carried letters for them, and I simply delivered them to addresses in whatever city I was going to, and that was that. And it was clear to me, or made clear to me, that this was for the Aliyah Bet, and my involvement at that point had nothing more than that. And I still had never heard of the GI Council. My contacts with the GI Council came about, I think, in March or April of 1946, maybe May of 46, when I went to a service, and I think Joe described it. This brash young man came up to me and said, "How many blankets do you need?" or something of the sort. I'm quite sure he's right. I heard him tell the story when he taped it to you, and it struck me as the kind of thing I probably would have done at that age, although I don't remember it, but he would. And it was my first, I don't know how I came there. It was in the building in Elsa-Braunschweig-Strasse where Joe had services. I don't remember under what circumstances I came there. I certainly never went there as a matter of general, as a matter of habit to go to services, because that was the last thing I ever want to get myself involved in. Joe was conducting them, and he made a speech about the GI Council, and they had a discussion, and I asked him what he needed, because I was very convinced that if I simply asked my family for whatever was needed by all the Jews of Europe, they'd be in quite a position to send it and would happily do so. I suppose that's the point at which I joined the council. I don't remember. We made the trips that Joe discussed. We used to go to this camp and that camp. I don't really remember any details about them. I remember Ziegenhain, Salzheim I remember best, for other reasons. I knew a lot of people there, some of whom I worked with later on. But my experiences with the GI Council per se do not stick in my mind. I know that Joe was the organizing force. I know that Avraham Levinson, whom I knew later for many years in Israel, and I still count as a close friend, David Marcus, David Schachter, or now Bar-El, those are, and Eliezer Dembitz, and Pearl are really the only names I remember. The rest, there were others, but I don't recall them. And I do not I cannot sit here and recall any specific trips or any specific incidents that took place. I simply don't know. It's terrible, but it's true. Looking at a third question here now. How the council started? It was started when I joined it, so I wasn't involved in it. Joe says that David Schachter and Eliezer Dembitz initiated it and went to him with it. I suppose that's what happened. There were no criteria for being involved. I'm still going along with your questions here, that I know of, except the willingness to show up and to contribute whatever you could. Activities you sponsored have already been described much better by Joe than I can describe them. And I can't give you dates and people at all. Question 4, please describe the role that Yosef Miller played in the council. How would you characterize? He was obviously the catalyst for all this and the organizer, but he was the one, you see, who had access to resources. He was the one who had the full time available for this kind of activity, and he was the one who had the drive. Whatever good wish you might have, or what money you might be able to throw at such a thing, or what trucks you might be able to commandeer for the purposes of these various projects. If you didn't want to do it, it didn't help anyone. Joe wanted to do things, and he did things, and he was young, and eager. To me, of course, he was an old man. He was 6 or 7 years older than I was. He was a chaplain and an officer, and I was a corporal in Green's Grass. But, and he had, although I didn't appreciate it at the time, he had a knowledge of Yiddish and a European background and all the rest of it. Kay I knew only very slightly. I don't think I met her very often. I never, until later when we all lived in Jerusalem, it was another story. Is there anything about the council that should be told that I have not touched upon? Oh boy. Wait a moment, move my leg, excuse me just a moment. All right. I wonder the extent, and I don't know the answer to this, that the council functioned on the QT, of course, as an auxiliary, or was used as a cover for various activities in the part of Aliyah Bet. I suspect that in some areas it was widespread. I know that in relation to the building that I later ran for the JWB, there was a great deal of this type of activity, but I'm not so sure to what extent the council was used to promote Aliyah Bet activities, or what the relationship was between individuals in the council or Rabbi Miller and the Aliyah Bet. He says it didn't become extensive at all in the Frankfurt area, and that may very well be. There may have been no connection whatsoever. Again, with question 5 about the council, I think it is probably easy to exaggerate the whole thing. It was a group of 10 or 15 or 20 basically young GIs. A few older people, civilians working in Germany, were involved in this, American civilians, who did some good things in their spare time, who collected some money and took care of hungry kids, and in effect raised the morale of people by just being there, which was a big thing. But I don't think one should exaggerate the importance of the council. It was almost as much therapeutic for the people who took part in the activities as it was for those who benefited materially or spiritually or in terms of morale by what the council was doing. The package program that started from Forest Hills to Frankfurt, that's question 6. How did it develop? Who initiated? How successful was it? If so, why? What role did Rabbi Miller play? For this, you'll have to ask my mother. I initiated it in the sense that I wrote to my parents, I guess my mother more than my father. She was probably the one who was the spark plug for it. My father was a quiet man. My mother was and is a lawyer, and anything but quiet. She's a dynamo. She's had a recent operation for breast cancer, and that doesn't seem to have slowed her down at all. In any event, I initiated it in terms of writing to her. And you'll have to get the details of how it was done and how much was sent from her. Joe talks about various boxcars full, I'm sure of it. I think a very interesting question. She can be reached at Murray Hill 46466. I think Joe put that on his tape. And I hope that by this time you have reached her, because she has all the information on it. All I know is from the receiving end, the things came in and they were distributed. I'm not sure how they were distributed. I wasn't in charge of it. I went along, I took pictures, I sent it back to Forest Hills, the pictures back to Forest Hills, because after all, the people who had done all the work on this and contributed all the things had to have some sort of recognition of what they were doing, and thanks for what they were doing. And it was quite an extensive project. I don't know how it was done. I am not so sure how it was distributed. Maybe I hope to read in your doctorate someday information on how much of this was used by Aliyah Bet for people who were going through to Palestine. I would suspect that quite a considerable amount of the material that came in was diverted to that, because it represented for Aliyah Bet, if they were able to use it, and I don't see why they shouldn't have, a source of supply that was not subject to U.S. Army or civilian control. for which they didn't have to sign false documents and finagle through chaplains and other sources in order to get the use of supplies. Insofar as people were tramping around Europe and going to the ships and what have you, a source of shoes, of new shoes, must have been a godsend. And I would like to know, because I don't know, to what extent these things were diverted for the use of aliyabet. Yosef played a very large role in it. Once the stuff came to Germany, I suspect that he was in charge of the distribution. I was not. As far as raising the stuff, that would be my mother, and you'd have to talk to her. 7, how would you describe the type of work that Rabbi Miller was involved in? Aside from those already discussed, how did he help the survivors of the Holocaust? I have absolutely no idea. Joe is the one to tell you. I had no experiences with him in this regard. We did nothing together in this regard, and I can't help you there. 8, were you or he involved with Aliyah Bet? Please be specific about what you may have done. The answer is yes and no. He was certainly involved. I will, again, I have no, I've given you some of it. I don't want to go into all details because a lot of my memory is bad. And I am not at all sure. I haven't read the books, Yehuda Bauer's book and others, on Aliyah Bet activities, but I'm not at all sure what is disclosable and what is not disclosable. And I'm going to sidestep question 8. 9, did you or Rabbi Miller ever become involved with the trains that transported Jews? Yes, but not in any way that would be of any assistance, and certainly it had no relationship to the council, and I had nothing to do with Rabbi Miller at the time. So it has nothing to do with the chaplains or the council, and I will sidestep 9. I apologize, but I will. Were you or Rabbi Miller involved with the Jewish agency or UNRRA? I was not. I don't know if he was. Well, insofar as the agency... How the hell am I going to explain that one? Let me see. About Yosef, he'll have to give that answer for himself. In the context in which you mean, I would say no. Insofar as I had relationships with the Jewish agency and there were individuals working with Aliyah Bet, yes, but they were not official agency personnel, and they were certainly not in, I think, the type to which you were referring to. With UNRWA, not at all. What are the Jewish organizations of you and Rabbi Miller involved with during this period? Describe the involvement. That's 11. I was involved with the... All right, let me finish my story here, and this will answer question 11. I was up for discharge in January of 1946, and I was preparing to go back to the United States to continue my studies at Cornell. I think this tape is about to run out. I will turn it over before I lose the middle of a sentence, so just stand by.